scared?
We were when we went to Dr.S.Cary's haunted house in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin.
Located just 20 minutes outside of Whitewater.
Going to a haunted house is one of the many fun activities you can do in the fall if you and your friends are born in Whitewater.
The haunted house industry is one with many aspects, several of which can be experienced through Pandemonium and the Dungeons of Terror at Dr.S.Cary's haunted house in Fort Atkinson.
Now, according to HowStuffWorks.com, the United States public spends somewhere between $300 and $500 million on the haunted house industry alone. With the average ticket price being somewhere around $15, that means about 3 million fear seekers visit haunted houses annually.
And did you know there are about 4,500 haunted attractions designed to scare your pants off?
Now, a haunted house won't do the same thing twice in a row. They're also branching out from just being in houses, such as like haunted hotels, like haunted theaters, creepy forests, hay rides, and creepy cornmazes. Now, Kathy, can you tell us why the horror industry is so successful?
Why, of course I can, CJ. David Weiss of Psychology Today wrote that the fear that we experience during our time in a haunted house gives us a rush and makes us feel more alive.
One of the things that might happen when you're confronted with fear is to react verbally.
Oh shit!
You all just observed how one may react verbally when they are stricken with fear. Perhaps you had a similar experience when we spooked you at the beginning of our presentation about Dr.S.Cary's haunted house.
Now, each of us has our own opinion on what we like about the horror industry.
Me, for example, I actually worked at a haunted house for 3 years in high school, and it was a blast. Scaring people is probably one of the funniest things you can do, because you just see them at like their rawest, because it's just their gut reaction. And during my time in the haunted house, I was always in the torture room, and I would have to let out a blood-curdling scream every 2 minutes. So let's just say that when I went to school the next day, I would be talking like this. My teachers were not a fan, but my introduction into the horror industry really wasn't the best. In the 5th grade, I watched this movie called The Groundskeeper. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but it is the campiest, worst horror movie of all time. But I was in the 5th grade, so I was petrified. So at one point, the murderer actually hangs his victim on like the coat hook of a bathroom stall. So now I'm just petrified to go into a public bathroom.
As for me, I've always despised anything that was scary. One time I was over at my cousin's house and someone was like, "Oh, Chucky's on, Chucky's on." And me being me, I thought it was Chucky from the Rugrats. But in reality, it was a menace of a doll chasing a little boy with a knife. So definitely was not a fan of that, and I ran crying to my parents. And if that didn't scare me enough, I decided to watch The Boogeyman in 5th grade, and I was always convinced that he was going to take me in the middle of the night.
Well, my personal favorite thing about the horror industry is going to haunted houses around this time of year. You know, there's always something different. You know, like CJ said, they never do the same thing twice. So there's always a surprise waiting for you around the corner. So the first time that I went to one, I was about 11 years old, and this one actually had guys with real chainsaws. And they were menacingly close to you to the point where you thought that you were actually going to get cut by them. I was scared shitless.
John, don't even get me started on chainsaws. Ever since I saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the 7th grade, I have had an irrational fear of chainsaws. And you guys are really lucky that there weren't any at Dr.S.Cary's haunted house. Otherwise, I would have booked it out there and left you all to die.
Thanks, Shayna.
Sorry.
Now, we came across this article written in the Royal News. Messed it up. Anyway, it was written by Amanda Ramirez, titled "Spookers Scream This Halloween." It was a reported event about Dr.S.Cary's haunted house, and she said there were somewhere between 20 to 40 spookers on duty at all times. The spookers is referring to the people that do the scare.
Ramirez elaborates by explaining that what it takes to become an actor there. First of all, there's a large training course they have to go through in order to be able to appropriately scare people and stuff. And one thing that you can't do as an actor is touch people in there. That's part of it.
Spookers also have to go through makeup and costume preparations, some of which take up to an hour to complete.
And the staff also has to perform run-throughs or dress rehearsals to make sure that everything's working properly.
We spoke with the man in charge of running Dr.S.Cary's haunted house, and he agreed that it does take a certain amount of analysis to make sure that everything works correctly and is appropriate for the haunt.
It takes a lot of effort to coordinate and run a haunted house, especially setting up multiple houses. The first of which is the Dungeons of Terror.
Let me just set the scene for you. As we entered the parking lot of Dr.S.Cary's haunted house, we were overcoming with the feeling of trepidation. Isn't that right, Shayna?
Yeah. Well, one of the spookers noticed I was the most vulnerable of the group.
Go on.
Well, there wasn't enough room in Kathy's car, so I took the opportunity to sit on top of Tim, John, and Steph's lap. Now, for those of you who have done this before, you know how difficult it is to get up and out of the car. Now imagine having to do this while a creepy ghoul or CJ is just scaring the crap out of you. Eventually, I just got out and ran away screaming.
Shayna's tear conjuring experience set the tone for our night of horror as we continued into the Dungeons of Terror.
One of the first rooms in the haunted house was my favorite. It resembled a cemetery with graves at our feet and an enormous gargoyle in the center of the room. It was really black and ominous, and suddenly there was a thunderous boom and a flash of light. And at that moment, the stationary gargoyle lunged at us. And I let out a really loud scream in Shayna's ear. Sorry, Shayna.
What?
The next room we entered had a crazed man dressed in a prisoner's jumpsuit. For some reason or another, he was shackled to a wall by his wrists. And obviously he was trying to break free because nobody likes to be chained up to a wall. So, being rational, I figured, oh, you know, it's chains. He's not going to break free. He's just going to lunge at us, but he's going to be like a dog. He'll fail at it. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. He broke those chains and pinned us up against a wall next to a dead body and yelled, get out at us in our faces.
So we did. Then we proceeded on to, not my favorite room, but in my opinion, the scariest, the snake room. I was leading the group at the time, and so when I realized what was in store for us in the snake room, I immediately ducked and screamed, which only increased the fear for the rest of my group members who were following behind and had not yet reached the snake room. Unaware of me at the time, the topless is also afraid of snakes.
Yes.
He was clinging out to me as a 15-year-old girl would to Channing Tatum.
Speaking of little girls, let me extend the context for you guys. What's the creepiest thing you guys have ever imagined? For me, it's this little girl standing about 2 feet off the ground, just sitting there, staring at you, saying nothing, just staring into your soul. And then screaming in your face.
From there, we stepped into a room that reeked of...
It reeked of shit.
That it did. It was the mad scientist room. As we continued walking through, we suddenly got sprayed in the face with blood. No, just kidding, it was really water, but still. As we rounded the corner, we witnessed a mad scientist cutting into a young man's body, ripping out his intestines, and eating them while the young man let out a loud scream.
So, as you can see, going through the haunted house was a lot of fun, and we were definitely scared. There was a point where Kathy and I, we were on the ground.
I don't know why we were on the ground. We just were.
And then Stephanie, you thought I was going to rip your sweatshirt off.
Yeah, that happened, yeah.
But what made this a unique experience, though, was that we were able to go behind the scenes of the haunted house.
Yeah, exactly. Steve Klein, the coordinator who runs Dr.S.Cary's, let us see the internal workings of Dr.S.Cary's haunted house.
He opened up this door that led into the secret interior hallway. This hallway allows the actors to jump from room to room and be wherever they need to be, so the same guy can escape twice. And it also houses all the electronic components that help power the house.
From the outside, the house is about the size of this room. So no, in other words, quite small.
Sorry. But Steve and his crew worked really hard with the small space, and there were actually over 14 different rooms in the Dungeons of Terror alone.
And while Steve took us behind the scenes, he actually opened the doors to some of the rooms so we could further see how they work.
At one point, there was a group that was about to pass us while we were in one of the scary rooms. So, given the opportunity, CJ and Shayna decided to hide and proceed to scare the living shit out of them.
I stood what was a cross between a bull and a bear dinosaur.
Something like that.
I have no idea what that's
Don't have any idea what it was. But anyways, as the group passed through, I took the opportunity to scare the girl on the end, and I succeeded.
Yeah.
And then CJ, you remember that when you were in the corner with the chains wrapped around your neck?
Yeah, glaring down the little kids who passed by. Yeah, Steve found it quite humorous, our participation in the room.
When we were guided from the first haunted house to the next building, an actor explained the disorientation and frustration we would experience once we entered Pandemonium.
Pandemonium isn't just a maze like it says it is. It's designed to disorient, frustrate, and just break you down mentally.
That's true. Pandemonium looked deceiving because of its size, just as the Dungeons of Terror did. We were all really skeptical of the difficulty of the maze because of this, but we quickly found out that we couldn't have been more wrong.
We unwillingly added a seventh person to our group. We called him the Drunken Dwarf. The Drunken Dwarf was really annoying. He kept yelling the entire time we were in Pandemonium, "There is no escape!" Yep.
Yeah, we originally thought he was like hired by the haunted house
Yeah.
just to scare people. But we later found out he was just a drunk guy from the trailer park next door.
The next room we entered, well, we started out going into this room that was kind of like a maze. And it just completely spun us around. You couldn't see ahead of you because there was all kinds of smoke. It looked like a circus tent, kind of. Really scary. But then the next room that we went into was like the darkest pits of hell. You could put your hand right here, you would not see it. Because it was pitch black in there. To make things worse, there were 4-inch corrugated drain pipes hanging from the ceiling, nailing you right in the face. You know, you pretty much had to go like that. You pretty much had to swim through it. And everybody pretty much had to hold onto each other's like shirt or something. Otherwise we would have broken apart and people probably would not have made it out of there.
So through this, our groups gained cohesiveness, a concept described by Werner Hergen.
Actually, it's Vertebrate.
Well, anyways, it's a concept described by our COMM textbook. CJ, Tim, John, Steph, Kathy, and I all at some point got to lead the group through Pandemonium, through the different rooms. It was really neat seeing each person taking on a leadership role and step up. And not only were we all leaders at one point, but we also cooperated with each other, listened, and learned how to trust each other in order to get through the maze.
After finally escaping the visionless hell of the pipe room, we entered a room with stacks of barrels, strobe lights, smoke, and a joker randomly popping in and out of nowhere.
The smoke, combined with the blinding strobe lights, made it difficult to even move in a straight line. We were just going like this. We were disoriented beyond belief.
And after walking in circles for what seemed like probably forever, we finally pleaded with the Joker to give us directions to release us from our torture.
And I got to hold his hand.
Yeah, that's very true. Good job, Shayna. And after much pleading and hand-holding was done, we were finally able to escape the mental torture of that room.
If all that wasn't enough, we hadn't quite entered the demented domain of the mirror room.
By the time we entered the mirror room, we had thought we lost the drunken dwarf. But we looked into a mirror, and there he was. Still there and still drunk.
Maybe drunker. I thought he was drunker. To make things worse, some diabolical genius developed the perfect angles to set a triangular pillar of mirrors right in the middle of the room, several of them actually, to make it look as if everything was a mirror so that you could not tell what was a mirror and what was open space without jabbing your hand into it and seeing what it was.
We spent what seemed like forever and a half wandering through this endless hall of reflections. And we had to use all of our leadership skills and our inputs to try and escape. But we failed miserably. We ended up having to beg the local ghoul to show us the way out, and he revealed to us that one of the mirrors was fake and was a real doorway. Did any of you guys do that?
No.
No. Didn't.
So we had plenty of opportunities throughout Pandemonium to quit, but we didn't, right?
No.
Yeah, no, we did not. We persevered and made it to the end.
Yeah!
Hell yeah! All right. Freeze frame. Yeah!
Going to Dr.S.Cary's haunted house made us become more interested in the horror industry and what it takes to run a haunted house. As a group, we truly had crazy adventures in Dungeons of Terror, and we're full of confusion and pandemonium, right guys?
Right.
Yeah, let's do it.
And also through this experience, we developed teamwork. More so, we developed a bond, and now we consider each other friends.
Since the haunted house, we've bonded over shopping, pizza, cupcakes, practicing for the speech,
Yeah.
and
Puppies.
Yeah.
So much love.
It's been a lot of fun working together as a group and getting to know each other.
It has. Next time that you guys are sitting there bored in Whitewater with nothing to do on a late fall evening, think again. Go grab your friends and go to a haunted house.
But keep in mind, there are other ways to get spookified in Whitewater. And you don't even have to leave your room. And, by the way, the witches are after you. Lights.
This universe seems to be full of black hearts before it was burned to the ground. But the witches left something behind. Before they were sentenced to death, they wrote a book. Every person who opened that book died.
I can't believe you committed suicide.
It didn't. There's something I have to show.
Doesn't it seem weird to you there isn't anything about the town's past before the school burnt down? It's like everything before that was erased.
Maybe it was. When the first witches wrote themselves into this book. Now, by touching it, you've been written into the